Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. On today's episode, we're going to have some fun with free agency starting tomorrow. We're going to go through our wish list and what we wish the Edmonton Oilers roster will look like come the season opener next year. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. Yes, on today's episode, we're having a little fun, baby. You asked, I delivered. You asked me what you thought I think the Edmonton Oilers should look like and what moves and trades the Edmonton Oilers should make this offseason. So I went through the entire roster. I did this for hours. I quit. I restarted. I walked away in frustration, but I finally have it. The roster that I think the Edmonton Oilers should have come next season. We are going to start with the goaltenders, move into the forwards, and then end off with the defensemen. That is basically how I think the Oilers shopping list should go in this off-season. So that will come up today on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, I have notes all over the place. As I told you, I went full madman. Like that GIF, you know, that meme that's going around or that goes around of the guy from Horrible Bosses, where he's just pointing at all the stuff on the wall. He's like, this and this and this will work and this will work. That's basically how I went about making this team. And so we're going to start in the crease, where basically the Edmonton Oilers only have Stuart Skinner slotted as the goaltender for the Edmonton Oilers. So what will the Edmonton Oilers do in the crease? I think the best possible thing for the Edmonton Oilers to do is bring back Cam Talbot. Yes, my first move as Edmonton Oilers GM tonight or today in this episode, whenever you're watching and listening to this episode, is to bring back Cam Talbot. Not Tam Talbot, Cam Talbot. He's currently sitting at a $3.66 million cap hit, which, if you take a look at basically the goalies that are still available right now, that's Darcy Kemper and Jack Campbell, who I think, if this were real life, or I guess in real life, the Edmonton Oilers were to pick up, it's going to be about $5 million at least to pick up either Campbell or Kemper. Talbot sits there at 3.66. He's a guy who's familiar with the city. I mean, he played with the Edmonton Oilers for some of the most important years of the last 20 for the Edmonton Oilers. Maybe not 20 because it's 2022. Maybe the last 10 years for the Edmonton Oilers. Cam Talbot was there and was the goaltender with Connor McDavid, who is early in his career, with Leon Draisaitl early in his career. Darnell Nurse has a lot of familiarity all around the Oilers lineup that is still in the Oilers lineup. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as well. He's been very vocal about his time at Edmonton. He has loved his time at Edmonton. A lot of Edmonton Oilers fans love him, and there's a reason. Cam Talbot is a very solid goaltender as well. I mean, it's not very difficult to take a look at the numbers and come to that conclusion. Last season, 32 wins for Cam Talbot in Minnesota, 12 losses for him. He went into, if I'm not mistaken, he either went into the playoffs as the Minnesota Wild goaltender, or it was Marc-Andre Fleury who went in as their goaltender in the playoffs, and Cam Talbot was the one who finished the playoffs for them. Let's be real, it's Marc-Andre Fleury. He just re-signed in Minnesota, and it sounds like Cam Talbot isn't too happy about that. He has said, Bill Guerin had a quite expletive response to Michael Russo asking the question of what is Cam Talbot going to do, or what are you going to do with Cam Talbot And it seems like the relationship in Minnesota isn't the best. I think the Oilers could get Cam Talbot out of Minnesota. So what would that look like? I have Cam Talbot coming to the Edmonton Oilers for Warren Foegele and a third-round pick in 2023. Yes, I know I'm starting it off with a player going out, and that is Warren Foegele. I like Warren Foegele. I don't like his finishing ability, but what he brings to the ice all the time, whenever he steps on the ice, is just hard work every single time. But that's something that is very easily found all around the league, and I think we found that in the forward group that we constructed that we will get into in just a bit. So I think Warren Foegele is an easy contract to move out. He's $2.5 million, I believe, off the top of my head. He's out of there. And a guy the Minnesota Wild, I think, would like as well. He kind of does, kind of plays a Minnesota Wild type of game. They're losing a guy like Nick Delorier eventually. Maybe a spoiler alert, where will he go? But I think he would be a nice fit in Minnesota. So I think Minnesota takes a look at Warren Foegele and goes, yeah, sure, that's not too bad, throwing that third rounder. Sure. And again, this isn't something that I 100% know, oh, Minnesota needs this guy. But I could see Minnesota liking a guy like Warren Foegele. So, Cam Talbot, the Oilers goaltender next year, I would like for the Edmonton Oilers. Because the other thing is that the thing that I haven't even gotten to yet is that Cam Talbot would be able to monitor and help mentor Stuart Skinner, which is exactly what you want. I mean, let's be real. Who would be better than one of the most important goaltenders in the last 10, 20? Honestly, he's probably one of, if not the most important goaltender, well, probably behind Dwayne Rollison in the last 20 years in the Oilers organization, in Oilers history in the last 20 years. Who would be better for your next goaltender, potentially, hopefully, for the next decade, and Stuart Skinner, to learn from? Obviously, he's already a local boy, and he was around when Cam Talbot was not in the organization, but again, he's a local boy. He was around when Cam Talbot was doing his thing with the Oilers a couple of years ago when they went to the playoffs. It was an exciting time and something that was contagious. Cam Talbot, I think, could really, really, really morph Stuart Skinner into something that a guy like Jack Campbell wouldn't be able to, a guy like Darcy Kemper wouldn't be able to, even a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury wouldn't be able to. I think Cam Talbot would really, really take Stuart Skinner under his wing and make him one of the, not the best goaltender in Oilers organization, but just the goaltender of the future for the Oilers. So, in the crease, I think the Edmonton Oilers should bring back Cam Talbot. That is the start of this whole roster rebuild, it feels like. We brought in 8 players to the Edmonton Oilers in this recreation, or what I think the Edmonton Oilers should do in the offseason. So let's get into the forward group, where we see a heavy amount of new names in the forward core. We will get there in just a second, but first, from the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. Yeah, that's right. The coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, the flavor you love, in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. Oh, I'm drooling. Okay. Stop drooling and listen to me. They are good for you, low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time, so make sure you head to built.com right now and make sure you don't miss out. They are going fast. All Built Bars are made with collagen proteins as well, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits for your body. Eat something that tastes good and is actually good for you as well. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Oh my goodness. Whew. I'm getting hot and heavy in here, and I'm already heavy. Stop fantasizing and get to Built.com right now to order your box of coconut brownie chunk Built Puffs. While you're over at Built.com, make sure you use the promo code LOCKED15, that is LOCKED15, to get 15% off your next order. That is LOCKED15, 15, to get 15% off your next order. Alrighty, let's move into the forwards. So I reach over for my notes over here, and our whole new forward group I think is kind of exciting. We will go line by line. I will start off with the lines, then we will go into the deals, what happened, how did we get them, and then I will get into kind of some of the notes as to why some of these moves were made. Okay, so the first line we have in the Oilers rebuild. No, not really. Our imagination. I haven't thought of a title yet for this. Our Locked On Oilers imagination of the Oilers off-season. How about that? We'll take that. The first line I have for the Edmonton Oilers reimagination or imagination of the Oilers off-season is starting off with Claude Giroux at left wing, Connor McDavid at center, and Dylan Strome at right wing. Now, I wasn't initially sold when the Dylan Strome rumors were coming out, but all the stuff that I've really read up on and really thought about it, to be honest with you, I think Dylan Strome would be a great fit in Edmonton. And plus, let's be real, him and Connor McDavid being reunited. I think I said reignited on the last episode as well. I meant to say reunited. I think would be great. And I think the Oilers can get him at a pretty nice price point as well. So I think that would be a very nice first line for the Edmonton Oilers. Again, Claude Giroux, Connor McDavid, and Dylan Strome. The second line has, well, no real movement at all. Zach Hyman going to be on the left wing, Leon Draisaitl at center, and Kyler Yamamoto at right wing. Yes, I have the Oilers bringing back Kyler Yamamoto on that or on a certain contract. We will get into that, but that's not really a hot take, really. But yeah, basically the only line that sees no movement. Here's the exciting part, I think, despite the fact that it's the bottom six. I think we brought in some pretty interesting names. One of them I don't think people will like, but that's okay. On the third line, left winger will be Mason Marchment from the Florida Panthers. I think he is a very solid add. I have him at a pretty team-friendly price point, so will it be that? We will see. We'll get into that in a bit, but I think he'd be a great add for the Oilers. Alongside him, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins at center, and Connor Brown from the Ottawa Senators. I think that deal will go through for the Edmonton Oilers. And I know that we're sitting here and like, oh, this is your team, not the team that the Oilers want or are trying to establish now. I realize that I could have kept Puljujarvi and it would have been fine. I think let's move on. It's best for both of us, both sides, the team, the Oilers. Let's just move on. He's at his highest value right now. If he doesn't turn out and the Oilers have to move on from him in a couple of years, they might not get the response or the return that they would get right now. So let's just get Connor Brown, one of Connor McDavid's best friends, who's played with him before. 128 points with Connor McDavid 1 year for Connor Brown. So they have obviously some sort of chemistry there. They are close friends. So I think Connor Brown would make a lot of sense. And then the fourth line, this is where things get interesting and where I think people aren't going to be happy. On the left wing, I have Danton Heinen coming over from the Pittsburgh Penguins. At center, I have Ryan McLeod, my boy Ryan McLeod. And on the right wing, a name that it seems like a lot of I don't even know the right, I guess kind of the analytics side of Twitter, Oilers Twitter doesn't like. I think he's the perfect ad for the Edmonton Oilers. If you don't, but you also said, why would you move Zach Kassian? You have your priorities messed up. On right wing, I think the Edmonton Oilers should bring in Nick Delorier. Yes, I know. But he's going to be cheap. He is going to be cheap. So that is the four lines. So let's get into the Nick Delorier deal. And then we will go through the Claude Giroux, the Dylan Stromes, and why I think they are the right ads. And how did the Oilers get him? Well, let's talk about Nick Delorier again, because again, people don't like him, apparently, for whatever reason on Oilers Analytics Twitter. I think it was Jim Matheson who brought him up, which somebody I don't always agree with as well, but I do think the Oilers should bring him in. Nick Delorier was one of the first names that I identified after the Oilers season ended. Now, this is why. When you take a look at his statistics, they're not too friendly. 81 games played, 8 goals, 5 assists, 13 points, but he is a bottom 6 guy. You're not expecting a lot of goals. Honestly, only 10 guys, which 10 guys is a lot to get 10 goals in a season, but still, only 10 guys got 10 goals for the Edmonton Oilers last season, at least 10 goals in their season. So there are going to be guys who might not be getting those amount of points. And then you take a look at the next stat, which is 113 penalty minutes. Okay. A little bit nicer. I know you're going, oh, why? He's not on the ice all the time. Well, if you don't want him on the ice and don't want him to be an important part of the team, there we go, excuse me, important part of the team when they're being offensive or anything like that, then you want him to be some grind type player, don't you? Now, the thing is when you take a look at the forward group of the Edmonton Oilers, and this is still along the lines of Nick Delorier, when you take a look at the Edmonton Oilers forward group that we constructed here, there isn't a lot of penalty killing rapport or a really exciting penalty killing guy, which sounds kind of counterproductive because all you're doing is preventing goals, not producing them. But I think Nick Delorier is one of the most appealing penalty killers, not really on the market or not necessarily on the market, but he still is appealing and would fit a need the Edmonton Oilers do need if we are going to move on from a guy like not necessarily Warren Foegele, but you're losing a lot of guys that could potentially be there for the Oilers in the penalty killing. Again, no Derek Ryan in this list. There was no Devin Shore in this list, which a lot of guys don't want. Plus, I haven't even added Dylan Holloway to this list as well. Nick Delorier could still be a 13th guy for the Edmonton Oilers rather than that always in the lineup type guy. And yes, Dylan Holloway, I think, will be in the lineup. I think you could move Mason Marchment down to the 4th line even and be just as effective. And Dylan Holloway, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Connor Brown sounds like an exciting line to me. Excuse me. But the thing about Nick Delorier is a 2.2 goals against per 60 minutes last season, which would have been good for 6th on the Oilers. And that was at 5-on-5. In all situations, he would have a 2.46, which would also have been good for 6th on the Oilers. That's not even as a penalty killer. That is him just at 5-on-5 in all situations. That is him doing his job, preventing pucks going into the net. And then as a penalty killer, a 4.29 goals against per 60 minutes shorthanded, which would have been good for 1st on the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, 1st on the Edmonton Oilers. So why would the Edmonton Oilers not look at a guy like Nick Delorier? I don't get it. But I spent too much time on Nick Delorier and not enough time on guys like Claude Giroux and Dylan Strome. Yes, I think the Edmonton Oilers could have a very exciting first line. And Claude Giroux, Connor McDavid, and Dylan Strome. Connor McDavid and Dylan Strome already have that rapport with each other. They played together in Erie in junior, just like they did with Connor Brown as well. Plus, Dylan Strome's coming off of a career year in a way. He had 22 goals this season, which is a career high. In 2018-2019, he had 34 assists and 51 points. So he has the scoring capabilities. Could you imagine him next to Connor McDavid? Plus, he has equal goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 with Kailer Yamamoto and goals against per 60 minutes as Tyson Barrie. So he's productive not only in a general sense, but he's productive when you compare it to current Edmonton Oilers. Well, if Tyson Barrie, I almost spoiled something there, but as current Edmonton Oilers. That's an upgrade in any point. At any point, you can put him in the lineup and you are happy with that. Mason Marchment. Let's move into Mason Marchment. I think he is a very interesting name. As I was taking a look throughout, I knew a little bit about Mason Marchment, son of Brian Marchment as well. Rest in peace to him. Just a horrible news there. But Mason Marchment, he sits 6'4", 209 pounds, is scary like his father was. 54 games played for Mason Marchment this past season, 18 goals, 29 assists in Florida for 47 points. Now, the thing is that he has a little bit of a grit to him as well. He had 53 penalty minutes, though. So he is able to stay on the ice. I think he is a great kind of middle six, even bottom six type guy. Like I mentioned, Dylan Holloway will be in the lineup for the Oilers as well. He'll be in this list as well. So Mason Marchment, if Dylan Holloway and when Dylan Holloway is in the lineup, could pump down to the fourth line, could pump up to the second line if anything goes awry with a guy like Kailer Yamamoto, whatever. He is versatile. That is exciting. Plus, Mason Marchment had a 2.06 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which would have been fourth on the Edmonton Oilers this year. And at 5-on-5, he had a 4.43 goals for per 60 minutes, which would have been exactly the same. Oh, excuse me. He actually had almost an entire full point more than Evander Kane, who sat at 3.43 and was the Edmonton Oilers' best goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Mason Marchment bettered that than a full point. And he wasn't even really a top six guy for the Florida Panthers. That's exciting. That is exciting. If you can put him in the bottom six of your lineup, that's scary. That's scary, man. But so how did these players end up on the Edmonton Oilers? Well, the first deal was the Claude Giroux deal. I think the Edmonton Oilers, are really any team who does get Claude Giroux, if they are to get him, obviously he wants term. As mentioned, he has a family. He wants stability. He wants to win a cup as well. So I think the Edmonton Oilers are in a place where they can offer him 3 years at 5.125 and get the job done. And I think he would be okay with that. Again, 34 years old right now, in a win now mode. I think it suits the Edmonton Oilers and Claude Giroux just fine. Dylan Strome, I think the Edmonton Oilers could get him at a 3-year, 3.125 as well. Again, a pretty good price point for him, all things considered. And if he's going to be playing on your top line, you'll take that any day. Mason Marchment's deal I have at 2 years, 1.25 as well. Danton Heinen at $1.15 million for 2 years. And Nick Delorier, $1 million for 2 years as well. Kind of trying to keep that term for a little bit. Especially with a guy like Nick Delorier, if things don't work out, he's only sitting there at $1 million or $1 million cap hit. Really, that's not too bad of something to eat for the Oilers. And again, the Connor Brown trade would be Connor Brown and a 2023 fourth. I have the Oilers bringing in a fourth for Jesse Puljujärvi as well. And you noticed as well, no Derek Ryan for the Oilers. I have him just getting sent off somewhere. I just threw in Chicago because they're a pretty bare bones team right now. And also I had a buyout of Devon Shore. I don't see there really being much of a market for Devon Shore. I think you could buy out Devon Shore and be all right. The Oilers didn't want to buy out Zach Kassian for whatever reason, obviously, but I think you could get off with a Devon Shore buyout. Just one more quick note on this as well. I think why on Danton Heinen. The interesting note on Danton Heinen is this past season, 76 games played, a career high 18 goals, 15 assists, 33 points. His career highs are 31 assists and 47 points. He is an unbelievable, weirdly unbelievable, or quietly unbelievable bottom six guy who can produce points, but he also protects the net. He can play defensively as well. Over the last 5 seasons, in all situations, Danton Heinen has the 16th best goals against per 60 minutes. Danton Heinen, over the last 5 seasons, he can produce, he can protect. I dig it. That's why I have Danton Heinen. I honestly, I'm taking, if I'm the Edmonton Oilers, I'm taking a heavy look at Danton Heinen and going, you know what? That might be a guy we might really invest in. Alrighty, let's move into the defensive unit, the decor for the Edmonton Oilers. Not a lot of movement here, just mostly, if there was movement, it was one trade to make some cap space. But even then, that trade brought somebody back. So we will get into that in just a second. But first, I want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. For your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL, as the Locked On NHL experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute podcast. Alrighty, let's move into the decor, as not a lot of movement here. This is a spot where the Edmonton Oilers can kind of shore up some things, a little bit here, a little bit there, but really it kind of is set in stone. But Duncan Keith did throw a little bit of a wrench into that. But I think we have a pretty decent turnout here. So, what I think the defensive core for the Edmonton Oilers will be next year, I think will be a Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci top pairing. I really like that pairing. I'm a big fan of Cody Ceci. If you've been watching from the playoffs, I think he's really done a very good job, especially as a shutdown guy. Right next to Darnell Nurse, who likes to be a little sporadic. And then this is where the interesting part happens. I think the Edmonton Oilers bring in Mackenzie Weegar, or I try to bring in Mackenzie Weegar from the Florida Panthers and pair him up with Evan Bouchard, and then Philip Broberg and Brett Kulak and Niemelainen as the 7th defenseman. So how did Mackenzie Weegar get there? Well, straight up, I traded Tyson Barrie for Mackenzie Weegar. Tyson Barrie sits at a $4.5 million cap hit. Mackenzie Weegar sits at a $3.25 million cap hit. I think it's a trade that both sides would be able to get behind. Obviously, that move would open up space for something in the forward core, or in this case, it brought back a defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers. But why Mackenzie Weegar? Well, let me read off some interesting stats for you. Mackenzie Weegar last season had 80 games played, 8 goals, 36 assists. 36 assists for 44 points and 81 penalty minutes. For reference, Darnell Nurse only had 54 for the Oilers. Physicality from the 28-year-old. The Oilers are getting younger in this trade as well, with Tyson Barrie going the other way. And the thing about Mackenzie Weegar is that he's almost a carbon copy of Tyson Barrie. 3.86 goals for per 60 minutes for him, which would have been good for 7th on the Oilers, and a 3.52 at 5-on-5 for goals for per 60 minutes, which would be good for 9th. But the thing is, is that he would be second. He would be the second defenseman on that list, behind only Tyson Barrie. And Tyson Barrie was only one person above him on the Edmonton Oilers. Almost a very similar clip between the two. But at the same time, Mackenzie Weegar also had a 2.56 goals against per 60 minutes last season at 5-on-5, which would be good for 8th on the Oilers if he were on the Oilers last year. And he plays on the PK, something that Tyson Barrie doesn't do. In fact, on the penalty kill, he had a 6.73 goals against per 60 minutes, which would have been good for 6th on the Oilers. And Mackenzie Weegar played 217 minutes on the penalty kill. He's an established guy on the penalty kill. Tyson Barrie didn't do that, but he can also get points. Over the last 3 seasons, Mackenzie Weegar has the 32nd most points amongst defensemen in the league. All over the last 3 years, every single defenseman, he has the 32nd most points. So he can produce and protect. You got to get guys who can do both. And if they can't do both, and I'm looking at you, Nick Delorier, you better be bringing something else, and that's the toughness. But he does protect. That is the nice thing as well. He does protect not only the physicality of the game, but also the net as well. Some interesting notes that I want to mention about this Edmonton Oilers roster. Because the Edmonton Oilers do have 2 guys on the LTIR. I'm sorry, I'm moving around all my notes again because I have to bring this up. But the Edmonton Oilers do have 2 guys on the LTIR. Obviously, that is Oscar Klefbom, my boy, and Mike Smith. And that means the Edmonton Oilers have $6.37 million in cap space. Well, in LTIR cap space, really. That means the Edmonton Oilers can go $6.367 million over the salary cap because of this rule, because they have 2 guys on LTIR. So the roster that we constructed, the Edmonton Oilers sit $3 million over the cap space, actually $3.5 million over the salary cap. But with the LTIR that the Oilers sit at, that gives us $2.8 million to work with at the trade deadline. So I know Mike Smith, Ken Holland likes to hit just as close to the salary cap, so then he gets like an extra bonus. I don't know exactly what the rule is. Honestly, for me, I think this would be the best possible thing for the Oilers to just get up and get past the salary cap, establish the team that you have. You have $2.8 million to work with in case you want an extra AHLer or a guy who comes up and down. Maybe a guy like Tyler Benson or something like that. Maybe a Xavier Bourgault potentially down the road. Or you can use it at the deadline down the road. The thing is, as well, despite the fact that we are sitting over $3 million over the salary cap, next season, this roster would have $18 million, almost $19 million in cap space for the following summer. And then the summer afterwards would give us $25.333 million as well. So yes, you are going a little over right now. This LTIR for Mike Smith and Oscar Klefbom expire next year, but we would still go into next summer with $18.99 million in cap space, and the summer after with 25. So we still build a lot of space for the future. So that is how I think the Edmonton Oilers could run their off-season. I know it's not like our usual episodes, but somebody asked if I could have a little fun on an episode and show you what I would do with the Edmonton Oilers this summer. So the final roster for the Edmonton Oilers that I've constructed: the first line of Claude Giroux, Connor McDavid, and Dylan Strome. Second line of Zach Hyman, Leon Draisaitl, and Kyler Yamamoto. Third line, Dylan Holloway, I will throw in here, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Connor Brown. Fourth line of Mason Marchment, Ryan McLeod, and Nick Delorier. And Danton Heinen as well in that forward group. Honestly, I would probably go Danton Heinen, Ryan McLeod, and Mason Marchment, and Nick Delorier be that extra forward. At defense, we have Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci as the top pairing, Mackenzie Weegar and Evan Bouchard as the second pairing, Philip Broberg and Brett Kulak as the third pairing, and Marcus Niemelainen as that extra 7. And in the goal, we have Cam Talbot coming back to the Edmonton Oilers, and his backup, well, his 1B, the future of the Edmonton Oilers, Stuart Skinner. Let's call it there, as tomorrow we will find out for real who the Edmonton Oilers will bring in for their roster next season. I am so excited to be here and cover it for you. Tomorrow's episode won't be up directly in the morning. We are going to wait to see all of the moves that happen, and then probably later on in the evening, probably around 6 or 7, probably 8 o'clock, that is when the episode for Wednesday will come out, recapping all of the moves that the Edmonton Oilers are surely to make on a busy free agency frenzy. Happy free agent frenzy eve, everybody. I love it. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. Let's get excited as the start of the Edmonton Oilers' future starts now. I hope you have a wonderful day. We shall see you tomorrow. Stay safe and don't do anything I wouldn't do.